As he mentioned, my name is Nicholas Whitaker. I'm on the News Lab team at Google. And really what the News Lab is a group of ex-journalists and entrepreneurs and innovators who are interested in helping news and the journalism industry in general. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the News Lab is and what some of the things that we offer at the News Lab for journalists or for students. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about immersive storytelling, which is an area of focus that I've been spending a lot of time in. You can find out more information about the News Lab. You can go to g.co/newslab, which is our website. We worked with journalists and creators to come up with a curriculum based around Google's tools. So whatever tools might be interesting to you as a journalist to use for more immersive storytelling, we're creating lessons on this site that are bite-sized, or about 5 minutes each, maybe 10 minutes at the max, where you can learn like the very basic skills you need in order to be able to utilize these various different tools. Also on our YouTube page, we have FAQs and tutorials. We also have a series of office hours that we're doing on very specific topics. We have a few actually on VR and 360 journalism coming up pretty soon. And we just did a whole series of them on accelerated mobile pages, which is a completely other presentation, which I won't get into today. But we do have a lot of information. If you ever want to get in touch with us, you can reach us at newslabsupport@google.com. If we don't have the answers, somebody that we know probably does. So definitely reach out to us. We want to hear from you. So why a news lab? Well, it goes back to the mission that Google really has. So, to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. That's pretty much the exact same role of a journalist, looking out in the world, gathering information and making it universally accessible and useful. And we think that, to create a more, robust and independent press, we have to work together. To take advantage of these skills, we can offer education and training to make those skills easier to use and adapt to modern storytelling. And we present that in a few different ways. Tools is really the area that I focus most on, education and outreach, looking and seeing what other tools that Google has that could be used for storytelling, and finding ways to get that information out there. Conferences like this are one of those methods. In-person newsroom trainings are another. And we do a lot of other types of immersive interactive experiences with journalists to try to make that industry thrive. Also, programs is another section, so we work with other groups within the industry. For example, YouTube Newswire is a group that we have pulled together to take advantage of user-generated content, vetted and verified in partnership with a group like Storyful to make sure that that content does actually take place in that region at that time, as the person that posted that content said that it did. And then data would be the last section. We're a data-driven company. Obviously, there's a lot of data at Google to take advantage of. For storytelling, who here has used Google Search before? Couple. Very good. So, how do we present this data in a way that journalists can use to tell stories? And we've seen this quite a bit during the elections more recently. And that is, again, a whole other topic, which I won't get into at this particular time. But I'm going to play this quick video to tell you a little bit more about the News Lab, and then I'm going to talk to you specifically about a few tools that you can use for immersive storytelling. Some of them more new, like 360 video, and some of them that have been around for quite a while, like things like Street View imagery. And then to play, do I just tap? Excellent. Uh-oh.
Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And some of the most important...
Well, it sounds great. Cool, thanks.
Important information out there today is quality journalism. We believe that the democratization of media has created new opportunities and new roles for journalists to play in the media industry.
The News Lab is Google's effort to use our technologies to be part of this innovation in journalism that's happening today.
We're really focused on how we can empower journalists and media entrepreneurs through tools, data, and programs.
I think it's extremely important that we come in this very collaborative fashion and say, what is it that we can do? We see that journalists tap into a number of different tools. We have Fusion Tables, which is a data visualization tool using maps. Maps itself, Google Earth, ways to really get a sense of perspective around where a story is taking place.
There are 3 billion searches performed on Google every single day. And being able to look across these searches and look for trends in what people are curious about gives journalists a new tool for telling data-driven stories.
Another way that the News Lab is working with journalists and startups is through a series of programs that we're launching.
One of our partners is the Center for Investigative Reporting, and we've produced a series of events called Tech Ranking. The idea is to bring together technologists and journalists to really unite around an important idea.
We have a partnership with Storyful, and we're working to create a YouTube Newswire, a tool that pushes verified user-generated news clips to newsrooms around the world. We're also working with Matter VC, a media incubator in San Francisco, and we're helping them expand their curriculum to a far greater number of startups around the world. We're at a time when really anything is possible in media. Innovation in storytelling is taking place all over the media ecosystem. And we believe the best way to create a more informed society is when journalists and technologists work together. And that's why we're here.
There we go. Thank you. So again, if you want to find out more information about any of those individual programs that we were mentioning or some of the other initiatives that we're taking care of, you can definitely find out more information on g.co/newslab, or you can just grab me after the event and we can talk more about it in more detail. But today we're going to focus a little bit more on a new field that I'm kind of working in, which is immersive storytelling. And this is really kind of a broad scope of a definition. And really what we mean by that are any tools that you can use that either are Google's tools or work with Google's tools to get a reader or a viewer into that story in a little bit more of an immersive way. And again, this has been around for a while. Street View, you've probably used this before. You've kind of gone to a location, you've looked around. This is a tool that can be used for storytelling. And this imagery is available all over the world. And the amount of imagery in 360 that we're capturing through Street View is increasing all of the time. This is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, or all the way down to coral reefs. And the imagery that you're showing yourself on the screen, whatever you look at on Street View, you can share that. You can share that as a URL. You can embed that in your article and use that as a more informative way to help tell that story. You can also create your own 360 content as well and publish that to a variety of different locations. One of those options is Street View. So you can actually publish your 360 images that you capture. I actually just captured one right outside of the university this morning, and after the event, I'm going to publish that. And you can actually look at that right through a URL to Street View. And it's actually, the attribution is maintained. So this example right here, this is Matteo Francisco. He took this image outside of the San Francisco Bay Area. He did a 360 using his mobile phone and then published that. And you can see that he published it there in October of 2014. And it's interesting because I've got thousands and thousands of people that have seen these images. And this is just me experimenting. I'm not even really yet taking full advantage of the storytelling capability, which we'll show you in a minute. But you can use a variety of different options or ways to capture that content. One of those would be your mobile phone. If you're on an Android or an iPhone, the Street View app allows you to basically follow the dot. You might have seen me doing that up here a minute ago. I was just taking a series of still images with my camera. The camera automatically stitches those together into a 360 image, which you can then share to the Street View app. It's available with iOS or Android, as I mentioned, or you can use a third-party camera. And you might have seen me there with a selfie stick a minute ago with this little tiny lipstick camera. That's a Ricoh Theta. So it's Ricoh Theta S over here on the left-hand side. And it's a relatively, I don't know if you guys remember the flip cams back in the day. It's kind of at that level, I think, of quality. It gets the shot. It does a decent job, to help tell the story. There are more high quality options available. And, that's when you get up into an image device like the Iris 360, which is a little bit more expensive, but it's still, it's about this big. It's about the size of a large, ball. You can put that in a backpack and you can go off and you can use that to capture 4 times the quality of imagery with one touch. It automatically syncs with Street View and then you can upload that imagery that way. Or you can use a DSLR camera, which is a little bit more complicated, but very, very high resolution. And the flow for publishing this content is relatively easy too. These 360 images that you capture on your phone, they're automatically geocoded. They show up in your contributions sections, and when you share those publicly, then they become live, and you can share those with the world. If you selected one of those, on a browser, you could actually open this up to share or then embed this image later on. And there's a few different solutions for embedding, depending on what it is you're actually trying to do. If you want to take a whole second career and learn about the Maps API, there's so much information, so much different utility that you can use this program or this application for to create things like panoramas, where you have this imagery. In a 360 format, you've embedded metadata into that, and you can use this third-party option which we've created called streetsphere.appspot.com to help inject that metadata into that image and then publish that to your website. It creates a little snippet of code which then you can then copy and then use as you need. This is a couple different examples of what this might look like actually in a news article. This immediately provides a more immersive experience. It tells the viewer or the reader, hey, look, you can view this on Google Maps, you can look at this in an immersive way. So you can really help people get into that story and give them more context about what's going on in the world around you. In San Francisco, obviously, raising real estate prices are becoming a strain on everyone, including small businesses. The San Francisco Chronicle did a story using a 360 immersive street view image to bring people into that environment so that they have more context and understand in a little bit more detail what it is that's being lost when you don't protect businesses like this. You can also use this API that I was mentioning earlier to do a little bit more sophisticated experiences. This is using before and after imagery in Nepal. Before, this is on the left-hand side, this is street view imagery. On the right-hand side, this is imagery that was captured by a photographer using a DSLR camera. And they used the Street View API to create a slider where you can slide back and forth to see that imagery and also navigate in 360, giving a lot more context to the scale and scope of this particular tragedy. A little bit more local, more Oklahoma. They also, way before the Street View app was even available, they did the same thing using before and after imagery to, again, show the scale and scope of this particular incident. There's other third-party experiments that we're working with as well. StorySpheres would be one of those. If you go to storyspheres.com, it gives you a platform to take 360 imagery that you've captured. So instead of publishing it to Street View, perhaps you want to embed that on your site without the Street View packaging around it. So you could take this image, a 360 immersive image, and then take a recording that you've done of audio and blend the two of these and actually put that audio specifically where you want it to be in the scene. So if I want to hear the ocean off to my left, I can make it off to my left. If I want to have an interview with somebody over to my right, I can put that person there as well. And this is a really good option for low bandwidth environments. If video isn't possible because either the typical user wouldn't have the bandwidth, maybe it'd be too expensive or it's just not as available, this could be a really interesting in-between place between just still images, still 360 images, and full-on 360 video. And again, obviously, you can embed these into your stories. Washington Post has actually done an experiment with this where they actually went out to cover New York Fashion Week. And they actually went out to shoot it with a 360 video camera, a 6-camera GoPro system. And they ran into some trouble, but instead of just scrapping the whole project, they pivoted and they said, hey, look, we can actually use the still images from this to still create an immersive experience. And it wasn't as high resolution as they would have preferred, but it still got the story told. And it did it in a very immersive way. And I think the next step up from that would really be 360 spherical video. And we have a few experts in the room here that I'll probably be talking about this in a lot more detail later today. But one of the things that YouTube has been providing since actually March of 2015 is 360 spherical video. So you can actually upload your 360 content to a platform which is already very popular and well known and well used. And with Cardboard, you have this second level of immersive experience. So now you can actually take a cardboard unit, which is relatively inexpensive. You can slide your phone into that to really create a more stereoscopic or deeper experience there. There's a lot of different cameras that are coming out on the market, and I've been testing a lot of these to try to find out from a journalistic perspective, which are these, I like the idea of backpack journalism, right? Can you throw it in your backpack and run out the door with it? Will you use it, right? Is it reliable? Is it relatively inexpensive? Is it easy to use? So a lot of the time I'm spending is looking for types of gear like this, and this is probably even an outdated list. The updated list is, changing on a weekly or monthly basis. This technology is shifting so quickly. But I've been experimenting a bit with the Ricoh. I've been also experimenting with other devices that are a little bit higher up in the price range. I haven't really gotten into the very high end, which are very, very exciting to me. But the YouTube spaces in New York City do work with various different cameras like this. And also in LA, that is. And then, well, this image is probably too low resolution to show, but these guys here are kind of like where I think things are going to be for a little while. This over here on the right-hand side, this is the Jump Rig. It's a partnership with Google and GoPro to create a 360-degree immersive camera system. It's not just the camera, though. It's a whole platform. So everything from the camera to the stitching options, and then also into like distribution with things like Cardboard and YouTube 360. The ones on the right here, these are third-party, obviously. The 360 Heroes is a really great one. Freedom 360, these different rigs which allow you to apply existing cameras like GoPros, which collectively with a handful of these create very high resolution images. You can swap them out easily too if something goes wrong with them instead of having to scrap an entire camera system. So the fact that they're modular in that way, I think is a really good benefit. However, on the post-production workflow end of things, it adds all these additional complications, like you have to stitch it. Right? It doesn't do it automatically. So, I'm looking out for other cameras that are coming out on the market, like the Gear 360, the Nikon Key Mission. Very excited about the Nikon whenever that comes out. But these allow you to create an easier flow or workflow, right? So you'll actually use that device. You'll go out into the field, you'll capture it, and within a very short turnaround, be able to produce content that you can share with the world. There's various different resolutions you need to be considering. The Ricoh all the way down here at the end, and it's strange to me that in 2016 now we're talking about like 1920 by 960 as being like the low end of the resolution scale. But all the way up to what YouTube is able to manage, about 3840 to 2160. This leaves a lot of room for these different cameras. The 2-camera iZugar rig is really interesting. I've been playing around with that lately with a little bit wider angle lenses on it. But again, you can go so high resolution and future-proof your content so that as different platforms allow even higher resolution, you don't lose that really good content to pixelation or what have you. Different platforms that you look at this content on actually create different resolutions as well. So if you look at it on a Google Cardboard, it's going to have a slightly different aspect ratio than other devices like an iPad or Chrome on a browser, on a desktop or iPhone or even an Android. There's different considerations from a technical standpoint, which we're actually going to be creating a lot of tutorials pretty soon that presents best practices around this type of camera. And thinking about the positioning of those cameras. The further apart those lenses are, the harder it is to stitch those and make that look like a cohesive whole. What different software are there that you can use out there? Right now, Color is the company. It's a French company that provides this various different software. Video Stitch is one. AutoPana Giga is the other one. These are kind of the industry standards right now. And there's a lot of other ones that are coming down the pipeline as well. A lot of different interfaces where you can work with After Effects, with plugins to manipulate this various different content. Once you've actually edited that content, you need to upload that someplace. There's various different metadata that you have to think about. I'll have links to all of this stuff after the presentation. I'll share them on social media. But you can also find all this information on our site as well. There's instructions on YouTube also around YouTube 360. So if you just search on Google, how do I upload 360-degree video to YouTube, it'll pop up pretty quickly up there. And you can find out more information about the details of that. But the idea here is that it's not that complicated. There's maybe like 2 or 3 extra steps that you need to think about beyond just uploading normal framed content to YouTube and presenting that, but it is making it much easier. And the different distribution platforms now are growing all of the time. I think right now there's, the numbers are growing, and I think Samsung just announced they're going to be handing out Gear VRs with all of their new purchases of like the Edge 7, I think it is called. And there's a lot of other headsets like the HTC Vive and the Oculus, obviously. I'm excited about those, and I think that that's good for a smaller audience. Cardboard is, much more universal. You can actually, it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot easier to kind of get out there to the world. That's really exciting to me as well, just giving people the opportunity to kind of dip their toe into VR in a pretty easy way. I'm most excited just about the phones that are coming out, though, that are capable of even producing this type of content. I mean, 9 times out of 10, the first time I watch a 360 experience, it's usually on my phone just scrolling, and then I'll usually put that into a viewer of some sort if that content, if the story is compelling enough. And I think that's really the big takeaway for me, and I'll get to that in a minute. Here's some numbers that might be interesting to you. About 5 million cardboard units have shipped, and that number is growing all the time. About 25 million or so installs of the Cardboard app on Google Play, which is really exciting, and about 350,000 hours of YouTube videos have been watched in VR. It's a lot of VR content. Which is exciting, right? It means that people are creating, they're experimenting. Now the key here, I think, is creating compelling and high quality content and creating guidelines and understanding of best practices around this stuff. But this isn't really the end of the story. This is very much the beginning of the story. And this technology has been progressing, I think, for a very, very long time. And if you really think about it, back to old stereoscopic images, I mean, this has been a progression, right? And in a big way, Google is investing in VR. They see this as the future of computing. And I think that there's a lot of really compelling opportunities here for storytelling with this type of technology. I came out of the framed world, right? I came out as a video producer. That was kind of my first entree into documentary filmmaking was through the frame. This very small frame, and then it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and now it's all around us. And there's different ways to experience this, and I think that first experience for people will be on a mobile device of some sort. Somebody says, "Hey, check this out." They hand them their device probably, and then they scroll around for them to show them, "Look, you can move in this," and that's great. That's a good place to start. And then when you get things like Mono 360 video through Cardboard, now you have an even greater sense of depth and presence here. This is my friend Tom Small at YouTube. He does a lot of testing around 360 capture methods. And we're working together to create tutorials and trainings for journalists and for creators that they're easy to understand so that people can understand that, hey, look, this is a medium that I can use to tell stories. There's a lot of examples that I can show you, and I'll share some links to these, and this list is always growing. But the key here, I think, is understanding how to control that audience and to create that experience for them, take them on a journey through this 360 immersive world, right? There's a lot of different devices that people are using to do that, and you can't really rely on the same principles that you used to be able to rely on with framed content. You don't have the same editing techniques. You don't have the same framing, right? So you have to think about things like, where do I put the, interview subject? How high do I put the camera? What kind of tripods do I need for that? Where do I stand? All of these questions start to build up, but it creates, I think, really unique ways of telling stories. There's a lot of companies that are out there that are doing really amazing work, and I think the ones that are creating it in a way where it's an immersive experience that also has some sort of call to action, I think are the most compelling to me. It's one thing to drop somebody into a tragic scenario and show them a place that's been devastated by earthquake or devastated by war, but not providing some sort of solution or some sort of action for them to take next, I think is a missed opportunity because this is such compelling content. One of the first VR pieces that I saw, one of the first 360 video pieces that I saw was from Immersively. Louis Jeb did Hong Kong Unrest, and for me, having shot video and worked in this kind of environment before, putting on a 3D or a cardboard and watching this video, it got me excited, right? I was there for a minute. And that for me was oh, this is a new form of storytelling that can be really compelling, that can elicit people's emotional response. Frontline just came out with a really good one too. It's called The Drop on the Brink of Famine. It's a really great use of the medium. And I think that there's a lot of news organizations that are coming out with content on the regular, and we're creating and kind of collating a lot of this as it's coming in, but we really want to hear from you. If you see a really amazing piece of work that you think that is a good kind of example of what's possible with the medium, share it with us. We want to share that with the rest of the world and let people know that there's really, really talented creators out there that are telling stories in a really immersive way. And it doesn't have to be really super complicated either. It can be something very, very simple. I think this, Al Jazeera English, I think this is a really great example of just innovating, right? The reporter went out, she had a Ricoh camera, she actually just handheld it and walked around the Hajj her 7 times in 360 so we could experience what that's like, because very few of us will probably have the opportunity to go there. And I think this is the very most basic form of storytelling with this medium. Just put people in the location, let them experience it. But it goes much, much further beyond that. This is another one of my favorites, Blick, based out of Switzerland. I met this guy 3 or 4 years ago, and this is exactly how he showed me. He was like, check this out. And he showed me on his phone this experience that he shot in 360 in a fighter jet flying over the Swiss Alps. And it's just like, this is amazing. How do I do this? I want to shoot this kind of stuff. Or just putting people into an experience that they wouldn't have access to otherwise, and creating an opportunity to interview somebody. I realize that as I'm showing these slides on a 2D screen, it doesn't really quite give it the impact that it should, but I have links to all of these. This is a 360 video of the inside of a Google self-driving car, and I think the thing that I really like most about this is the Sacramento Bee, and they just put the camera on the back of the headrest of the front seat of the car, and they had the 2 passengers in the front, and they were interviewing them, and the 2 journalists were sitting in the back, and you're just kind of riding along, as like this 5th person, but it gave you this really interesting experience. You could kind of see like their unease in the back seat of the car as the car drove itself. And I think that helped tell that story. It made it feel like you were there, right? And I keep on reiterating that. I think that this is a perfect opportunity to kind of drop people into these experiences in very lightweight ways. And again, thinking towards that mobile audience, and then encouraging them with really compelling content, with really rich content, to maybe go a little deeper, put it into that 360 cardboard unit, or maybe another type of immersive headset. And I think that this will just continue to evolve. And like one of the things that we're working on right now is kind of what we're calling experiments. And this goes into this category of experimenting with other cameras and other workflows. Things like sensor journalism, things like drone journalism. How do these things interact with one another? How do you use them in concert in a compelling way, in a purposeful way to tell stories? And we're working with creators to find those best practices. So, within the next several months, what we're hoping to do is to hear from and to reach out to experts within the field to create kind of a consortium of understanding around like what these best practices are. And we're going to have more information on that available pretty soon. But if you're interested in talking with us about immersive storytelling or any of Google's tools, if you're working on a project and you get stuck, and you're like, I just don't know what to do now, reach out to us. You can find us on social media. We're very active on Twitter at Google News Lab, on Google+. Again, those office hours series I think are really, really useful. We're getting a lot of really good feedback directly from people who are using these tools, asking these questions so that we can then create better lessons on our site around those. Also our YouTube page where you can find case studies. We're going to be rolling out other interview series with other creators and other types of journalists out there in the field to talk about issues ranging from monetization of content to VR and 360 journalism to accelerated mobile pages, which will have even more content up on that shortly. But I guess the bottom line here is just stay in touch. newslabsupport@google.com. I've got a couple other URLs here. Again, g.co/newslab is our website. And as I mentioned before, we're rolling out more lessons on that site all the time. Let us know what tools you want information on, and we'll create lessons on them. Also, practice mapping. If you want like a master's level course on mapping, my colleague Vanessa Schneider has put together this really great website. It basically goes into every single mapping tool you could possibly ever want to use in pretty good detail. So if you're interested in using Street View imagery, if you're interested in using the API, or if you're interested in using any of the other visualization tools that were mentioned in that video, it's a good place to start, those 2 URLs. There's also a mailing list that you can sign up for. So if you're interested in using Google Earth imagery, for example, which is a whole other tool which we really haven't gotten a chance to speak about yet. But taking advantage of the 3D imagery in Google Maps, again, to put people into those locations and to get them there, to help tell that story. There's a mailing list that you can sign up for, so as new imagery comes out that's newsworthy or relevant to the news cycle, you can find that at g.co/Google Media Alerts. That'll come right into your inbox, and we won't spam you. We're only going to send you information that would actually be useful. So definitely sign up for that. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, I have about 10, 15 minutes.
Questions? So I'd like to start by asking you sort of where you are on VR versus AR and sort of, I mean, obviously you touched on it quite a bit,
Yeah.
but the differences and what you see as being practical day-to-day applications for those.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I look at this entire, and actually I'll just kind of flip over here so you guys have the links. I think of it all through just the storytelling lens. So like, can I use this to tell a story? And I'm excited about all of the new developments that are coming out around VR and AR. And it's like, it's something that I've been focused on for a very, very long time, from back in the gaming days, like when I had time to do those things. And for me, it was the ability to put on a pair of 3D goggles at the time and kind of get into this immersive experience. Created a whole new type of story for me. And I think for me, like the 360 video is really what I've been focusing most on, because I think it has it's the easiest thing to reach for the average journalist. Again, back to that idea of like a backpack journalist. Can you throw this in your bag? Can you go out into the field and can you produce with it? And not everybody has a budget for a very large camera or a whole array or rig, but it's good that there's like a spectrum of those different tools that are available. So for me, I think like definitely starting with 360 video, there's a lot of storytelling capabilities there. 360 imagery more simply, I think is really, really interesting. And especially now that there's other options to overlay other content into it, whether it be text or audio. That really helps solve for me kind of like, what about all of the users that don't have, the latest smartphone or don't have the best bandwidth? There's a whole lot of people around the world that don't have like the newest and latest and greatest. So like for me, that's like the first step in. And then with augmented reality, I mean, I think that there's so much potential there from the user experience, just the user interface. If I could spend less time looking at pixels like this, and have more experience with the world around me and being able to interact with it, I think that just creates more opportunities for creativity. So I'm interested to see how that works on the flip side for the user experience for like display, and how that immersive experience becomes something beyond just like a frame or a boundary. It's become something that you're immersed in quite literally. So I think those are really exciting. I think we're really early on with a lot of that, but I'm excited to see where it goes.
Questions? I'm going to walk around the room. Here we go.
Does Google or YouTube have any insights into, I don't know, a graceful kind of fallback for when people don't have the bandwidth or the technology for 360? So a standard video replaces it, or the 360 becomes a video somehow? And any plans, on that?
Not that I'm aware of, but that's a really important idea. I think, again, thinking about those environments where like bandwidth is limited, there's solutions for that in other applications. So like accelerated mobile pages would actually be a really good example of that. Like how do we cache or load content in a way that's faster, right? But like way less bandwidth. And I think it's going to be a super big challenge. As far as like 360 video is concerned, like some of the videos that I watch on this computer, or my computer, the computer fan just goes crazy on that. So the technology needs to be addressed, I think. But as far as I'm aware of, there's no specific things that I know of that are being done. But I could see a lot of applications where you can give the user a choice, and they can help self-select, what type of bandwidth experience they have. So I think that while you're out in the field, when I think about it from the capture side first. So when I'm in the field, am I shooting it for all audiences or for a broad spectrum of audiences? So while I am possibly shooting 4K content, possibly I'm also doing some still images or producing still images that I can share that also tell that story, but in a lower bandwidth way. And then maybe even do some framed content as well, and provide those options for people. But yeah, I don't think until then, I think this is probably the best solution.
There's two different audience experiences developing. On one side would be the cardboard and the other mobile phone driven viewers, and the other side, the Oculus and the high-end expensive viewers. Where do you see are these definitely going to split into two different types, or where do you see these audiences going?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know that there's a sure answer for that. I think the way I look at it is not so much as like different sides and different camps, but I look at it as kind of like a spectrum of depth of experience, and that's kind of like a judgment call that you make either based on your budget or on the type of immersive experience that you're most likely to have. Like I talk about this with my wife a lot. it's a little awkward, having a headset and just hanging out beside her while she's doing something else. And she's like, what are you watching? And it's like, and you're in this experience, and it's not a shared experience. And the AR thing is really exciting to me because that produces a lot of other opportunities, I think, for those shared experiences or linked up units. So there's things that need to be considered and worked out still, I think, from a social standpoint. When is the appropriate time to watch an immersive experience like that? And I think that spectrum will probably exist. So that if you're in line getting coffee, you're probably not going to drop it into a cardboard unit. You're probably just going to watch it on your phone and maybe save it for later to watch it when you have more time. I look at it almost very similarly. I was just talking yesterday on a hangout. We were talking about long form content. And is there still an appetite for that? Is there still a forum for that? And I'm like, yeah, I love long form content. I think it shifts in when I read it though. I read a long form piece of content later at night, when I've got the leisure and the time to actually get immersive or get immersed into it. And I see that the same kind of experience with framed content versus 360 video, cardboard versus a mobile device versus a headset. I think it depends on the circumstance and how much depth you have the ability to go into it. But I think it's going to probably still persist for quite a long time, that there's various different levels that people can get into. At least I hope there is.
So I've got a question that dovetails off of those a little bit, but takes us in a slightly different direction. With everything that you're talking about and everything that we're experiencing today and have been for the last 10 years, 15 years, there's this radical shift in the way that we're experiencing things. And I love the storytelling mechanisms, et cetera. Is anybody at Google thinking about or worrying about the persistence of the records that we're creating about the past?
Yes, yes, there is. And I think it's interesting, things like link rot, which is something a few of us on the News Lab actually are working out right now and trying to, not on our own, but trying to find experts in the field that can help kind of solve for some of these issues. And I think it takes a few different forms. I think it could take the form of funding an organization that's capable of archiving a specific type of content, for example. These would be more niche types of archives. Things like Public Data Explorer at Google was kind of a first attempt at that. It was here's a whole bunch of data that's out there. Here's data sets that you can get access to. Here's an interface that you can use to visualize this in a very basic way. But I think there's so much more potential with a tool like that. And we're talking about, is there potential with that with elections, for example? There's all this data that we're putting out there for elections, and we're putting that out on our GitHub pages for people so they can, use that data, or there's a small archive there, but on a more universal sense, are there organizations that we can work with to help solve for some of that? Because I think that's going to become more and more of an issue. I mean, these 360 videos, it's a lot of bandwidth. It's a lot of stuff just to be stored on hard drives if you want a backup of that, let alone where does it go, and how long does it persist online? I think YouTube's going to be around for a while, so that's pretty exciting. So I think that people who are uploading their content there, they can have reasonable confidence that it'll be there for quite some time. But I think that how do we deal with these changing forms of media and making sure that we're preserving those? It's a perennial question, and I would just say that if anybody's interested in that stuff, definitely reach out to us, because we're trying to find people both within Google and externally to help solve for some of those problems. Yep.
First of all, thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
And I share your enthusiasm about AR. I'm really excited about the collaborative possibilities of AR. My question, though, is that when you're designing for screens, phone, web, watches, whatever, there's actually a process for experience design. Mm-hmm. Would you talk a little bit about the applicability of the transferability of the kind of that experience design process to either 360 or AR worlds?
That might be a little bit outside of my frame of reference, but I think I can comment on it in this sense. I think for me, I'm a storyteller at heart, right? So for me, it's always about how do I create an experience that is immersive and useful for that viewer. And I'm trying to think about what's the most likely audience that's going to be absorbing my content. So I'll design the content from the very shot placement to the camera placement, the type of camera I'm using, the type of filtering that I'm using, if any. And thinking about that particular audience and making sure that content is as interesting and compelling as can be for that medium. So in that sense, I assume that the vast majority of my audience is most likely on mobile. They're most likely not on the best and fastest mobile device, but they're probably on a pretty decent one. They're probably interested in a certain subsection or whatever topic it is that I'm focusing on. In my day, it was documentary filmmaking and advocacy and public spaces and bicycling. That was a lot of stuff that I spent a lot of my time on. So I was filming definitely for that specific audience. And now I think with different options with 360 video, I think those same questions are being put into play. And I think there's a lot of really great organizations that are thinking about this right now, and even thinking a little bit deeper than that about the ethics of it. Ooh, all right. Ethics. Thank you. But yeah, thinking about these things, I think is really important. And I think that the design thinking, and I think to the core of your question is can you apply these things back the other direction? I think yes, you most definitely should and can. And I think it always goes back to that user and back to that audience. Are you shooting for them? Are you taking them into consideration? Are you taking advantage of all the tools that are available at your disposal to help tell that story and help to frame that story for them?
Hey, how's it going?
Hi.
My name is Zach Newman, and I'm a part of the Mizzou virtual reality team here within the journalism school, and I'm working with Story Up Studios as well. One of the things that we had run into a lot is using production with the Theta and other cameras, like Sony came out with one where it's two 180-degree fisheye lenses, which, from my experience, a lifetime easier than the 6-camera GoPro rig. Do you think that that'll be the future and the 6-rig camera will be obsolete, or where do you think the trend will go?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I'm always really cautious about answering questions about what's the future of this thing going to be? Because no one knows, right? I think that there's a lot of activity right now actually on creating cameras that are either gin-locked or synced, where there's multiple different lensing systems that are being computed by one computer. And I hope that the stitching elements become more and more easy. I don't know really what other manufacturers are doing. I can't really speculate on that. But what I can say is that people are really paying a lot of attention to that workflow. And as other industries have done the same, I remember when trying to sync various different audio clips with video that had drifted out of sync back in the day, and Final Cut, and oh my God, I'm doing this manually, and this is horrible. And then this program called Pluralize came out, and it was magical, and it was this is amazing. How is this even possible? And I feel like there's technology coming out today in the post-production workflows that's similar, right? And also in camera technology, I would have never thought a couple years ago that they would have had a camera that shot and stitched itself, and then you could just upload that right. I mean, that's crazy. So, I think that people are addressing those issues, and I think it's all about making that process faster and easier and more simple. I think there's a lot of benefit to being able to swap lenses out and swap cameras out, because if one of them goes bad, you can pop a new one in. But I don't know. It's it's an equation you have to figure out for yourself. Is that reliability factor more important, or is a shorter post-production workflow more important? And until there's more machine learning involved with it, I think, and other types of stitching programs that are coming out, which make this whole process easier, or cameras that do it in camera, I think that that's probably more what excites me most, is making that process way easier.
Kind of piggybacking on that question, hardware versus sort of the conceptual output. If you look at HoloLens, you can see that you can take your screen and now you don't need a big screen on the wall. Do you want to riff at all about sort of the obsession with hardware versus outcome? Not yours in particular, but just we kind of get caught up in hardware sometimes, don't we? And
yeah, no doubt. It's a really important question to raise. For me, it's always about what's the quote? It's what's the best camera to have? It's the camera that's on you. Right, so I'm not sure exactly who quoted that, so somebody could fact check me on that. But I think for me, it's whatever camera I have on me that I'm most likely to pull out of my pocket and actually use. That's the thing that's most important. 9 times out of 10, I'm not shooting on my DSLR camera. I'm shooting on my phone. And I'm always looking for the best phone to give me the best possible quality of image, so that is one thing that I focus quite a bit on. But I think for me, it's always about the story, and is it compelling? Is it something I want to share? Is it something I feel tells a story? And if it doesn't tell a story, it doesn't matter what camera you shoot it on or what gear you shoot it on. No one's going to want to watch it. So for me, it's always story first and then hardware second. And then once I start considering the hardware, it's not what's the most expensive thing that I can buy. It's what's the most viable product that I can find that I'll actually go out and use, and that if I toss it in my backpack, I know it'll keep working day after day. So that's kind of how I approach it.
Sure, makes a lot of sense. Nick Whitaker from the News Labs at Google. Thank you.